What's happening, everybody? Welcome to today's edition of Swag Talk, the show where we cover the swag inside and out. I'm your host, Charles Wells, aka C Wells, coming at you with another edition of our spring 2021 season recap. Today, we're going to talk about the Panthers, the Prairie View, those guys from the hill up there in Texas. Before we get into all of that, let's go ahead and do the all these little plugs and whatnot. Facebook.com/swag talk, Twitter.com swag talk 76, Instagram.com swag talk, and swag talk 76 at gmail.com is the email address. Check out the podcast, Swag Talk. It can be heard on anchor.fm/swag talk, or you can check it out on Spotify, Stitcher, Breaker, Google Podcasts, Apple Podcasts. Um, we have an episode uploading today covering Prairie View. We're going to go a little bit more in depth in the numbers and talk about the Panthers and how their spring season went. Coming up this week, Wednesday, Swag Talk Time Machine coming at you on YouTube. Um, we're going to talk about Prairie View 2009 Swag Championship. And we're just going to also talk about how the Panthers, the run that they had, the build up to get to even winning that championship, what they went through as a program. I'm sure a lot of y'all familiar with Prairie View and how they were back in the day. Some may not be. So I want to go ahead and share that because I think just that that one championship was very important to not only them, but just important to the SWAC as a whole because what that program went through, where they came from to winning a championship is very important. And to me, is really important. Um, Also, like I say, next Sunday, we'll be talking about Southern. We'll be recapping Southern Spring 2021 season. So keep your eyes out on that. There'll be a podcast and a YouTube video on that. Keep your eyes and ears open for that. Go ahead and subscribe to the page. We're on the march to 200 subscribers. If you haven't done so already, why don't you go ahead and subscribe for your boy? Like the videos, share them. Feel free to comment. I love to talk to everybody in the comments. You comment, I will respond. So feel free to do that. Hit the notification bell so you can be alerted to any content that I upload. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and talk about Prairie View and how they did this season. They had in an abbreviated 6 game season. They only played half of those games. They played 3 games on the season. The first game was supposed to be on February 27th against Grambling, but that game was postponed due to that bad winter storm that came through the South. Did some damage to the Cotton Bowl, so they couldn't play that week. So they ended up opening up their season on March 6th at home against Texas Southern in the Labor Day Classic played in the springtime. They won that game 20-19, and again, that Texas Southern probably should have won. They had some issues late in the game, allowing Prairie to get back in it. March 13th, they played Grambling at Globe Life Park in Arlington, Texas, instead of the Cotton Bowl. So the State Fair Classic moved west. They beat Grambling 17-10 in a game that was pretty much a defensive battle. Grambling was in disarray after that portion of the season. April 3rd, their game against Alabama A&M was canceled. Basically the week of the game, a couple of days before the game. April 10th against Southern, that game also was canceled due to Prairie View having issues during the pandemic. April 17th, they were able to get back on the field against Arkansas Pine Bluff. They lost that game 36-31 in a game where they were actually short on running backs, and they still were able to compete and give themselves an opportunity to win. They just couldn't get it done. And then their game on April 24th against Jackson State was canceled as well. On the season, Prairie View was basically a middle of the pack type of team on offense, especially. They averaged 22.7 points per game, 22.6, excuse me. They allowed 21.6 points per game, so pretty much even. As you can see, every game they played, the largest margin victory on the season was 7. They lost by 5, so that was a total of 13 points separating them and their opponents in all 3 games. So as you see, the score was very close, going both ways. Running the ball, they averaged 101 yards per game rushing, which was last in the league. They had an average of 3.2 yards per carry, which was also one of the lowest. Defensively, they allowed 132 yards per game rushing, but they did allow only 3 yards per carry, so they did a good job on that. 265 yards passing as an offense, 4 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, so not a good ratio there. They allowed 194.3 yards per game passing, 6 touchdowns and 4 interceptions, so that number was flipped for the defense. Defensively, they had 10 sacks on the season. Their offense allowed 7. They converted 39% of their third downs. The opponents converted 36. Again, pretty even. They had an average of 366 yards per game on offense. The opponents 327, 73 yards per game on penalties. And if you follow Prairie View football, you know that this team is always going to be heavily penalized. I know that's something that they really are trying to work on. The last couple of years, they've been bitten really bad by penalties. This year, again, the same. One of the highest yards per game in penalties in the conference, even though they played one of the lowest amounts of games. So, that's just something that they're definitely going to have to work on. The running game, like I said, was not great at all. Two of their top three rushers were quarterbacks. Trezon Connolly, their starter quarterback, was actually the leading rusher. He had 112 yards on the season, averaged 4.3 yards per carry. Um, Christian Mosley was the leading runner as a running back. He had 29 carries for 100 yards even. TJ Starks, also quarterback, 16 carries, 57 yards. You had a guy like Tony Mullins, a wide receiver, 10 carries for 5 yards. So they tried to use whatever they could. Not much success running the ball. The longest rush on the season was 44 yards. After that, the second longest rush from scrimmage was 23 yards. Passing again, not great. They completed about 50% of their passes as a team. Connolly completed 52%, Starks 47. Connolly had a 4 touchdown, 4 interception ratio. His longest pass on the season was 60 yards, 574 yards passing on the season. Starks 221, no touchdowns, no 2 interceptions. So again, just not much consistency in the passing game. Chris Johnson, leading receiver, 7 catches, 129 yards. Mullins and O'Connor were the only two receivers with double-digit catches. O'Connor had 12 for 122. Mullins 11 for 128. Uh, no touchdowns for Mullins, one for O'Connor, also one for Johnson. Christopher Simmons had a touchdown. He had 5 catches for 120 yards. That's a big play guy, 24 yards per catch average. Johnson 19.8 yards per catch average. His long on the season was 60. Simmons, his longest catch on the season was 45. So again, they did try to go deep. This offense was replacing two dynamic guys in Dewanye Tucker at running back and Jalen Morton at quarterback. Tucker was a small guy, but man, he was fast. If you let him get behind the line, get behind the offensive line and hide and get lost back there, he was gonna burst out on the other side. Morton was a pretty good sized quarterback. He was also a good runner. He had a nice strong arm and he definitely loved to spread the ball around. So those are two pieces that they are still trying to replace. They didn't do a lot in the spring to really offset those losses. They're adding Chris Scott from Alabama State. He transferred there as he's a quarterback. So we'll see how he factors into the mix. He didn't get a lot of burn at Alabama State. A lot of people there weren't too sad to see him leave, and I don't mean that as any disrespect. I'm just going on what I've seen people say. They did say he had some injury issues, which kind of set him back there too. So maybe this is a fresh start that he needs. We'll see. The quarterback room is pretty crowded, so we'll talk about that when we go into our fall season preview on Prairie View. Defensively, Prairie View was a team who was, I mean, they were very good. They didn't have the greatest numbers, but they had three guys individually who I could say were easily one of the best at their positions in the league, led by Story Jackson, linebacker. He had 50 tackles on the season. that's just that's a crazy number. He had 31 assisted tackles, 19 solo. That was 30 more tackles than the second place guy, Jason Dumas, who is a monster on the defensive line. Reggie Stubblefield was probably their best defensive back. He chimed in with 16 tackles on the season. Story Jackson and Stubblefield are both gone now. They're both into the transfer portal. Stubblefield is at Kansas State. I know at one point he had committed there and then said he was going into the draft. I think he decided to go back to Kansas State. So if that's either way, he's not at Prairie View. Story Jackson is at Liberty now. So that's two holes, two big holes in that defense that they weren't anticipating. Jackson leaves a huge hole in the linebacker room. A guy like Trayshawn Smith, who's kind of more of a hybrid type of guy, he's probably going to be their top linebacker now if they keep him down in the box. Defensive back wise, they still have guys like Drake Cheatham, Jalen Hall, Tariq Mulmore. So they do have some pieces, and with a guy like Jason Dumas anchoring that defensive line, they're still going to be solid. Dumas had three sacks on the season to lead the team, 7.5 tackles for loss. So they still have some good pieces, and Prairie View's been building up their defense the last couple years. If you follow Prairie View for the last 4 or 5 years, you knew defense was an afterthought. They were offense first, try to outscore you, and if they were able to get a stop or two, then they most likely would win the game. But now this team is kind of flipped, kind of a little bit similar to what they were in the early portions of the decade of the 2010s. That they were a little bit more defense oriented, but they could make plays on offense. This defense is gonna have to carry this team in the fall, so they're gonna have to obviously replace a guy like Story Jackson. That's gonna be hard to do. He was an All American. Uh, Regis Stubblefield, like I said, is an All SWAC type of guy. So those are guys who are gonna be tough to replace. And you have a coach in Eric Dooley, who I think a lot of people probably feel may be on the hot seat. He had, some very talented teams his first couple of years there, and they were teams who were picked to win the division, and they never did. I don't think they ever finished higher than 6-5. So this fall is going to be important. Spring didn't do him any real favors. It didn't. I don't think it hurt him that much, but it didn't do anything to help him. Um, the winning 2 games was not really looking great in those 2 games, and then losing the Pine Bluff. I don't think this was a very helpful campaign for him, but I do think it didn't hurt him as much as some people may think. But I think that this fall will be vital for him. It's gonna be tough with Alcorn moving over to the West. That kind of slides everybody down a notch. If you finish second or third in the division before, you're probably gonna finish third or fourth, and just on down the line. So a team like Prairie View, who had to navigate basically Southern and Grambling, now has to navigate Grambling. Well, Grambling's a wild card, but they had to navigate Pine Bluff, Southern, and Alcorn. So they could easily finish fourth or fifth in the division if they lose a couple of those games. So this is going to be a tough division to play in. Um, I don't think it's going to be as tough as the East. The East on paper is going to be a bloodbath. So it's going to be interesting to see how that goes, in reality. But both divisions are going to be tough. Whoever wins either division is going to have their work cut out for them, and they will have earned it. So that's going to do it for this episode. Again, we're going to have an episode of Swag Talk Time Machine on Wednesday covering Prairie View's 2009 Swag Championship and their lead up to that. So next Sunday, episode of the podcast and YouTube video on Southern Spring 2021 season. So those are a couple of things to look forward to. Again, I'm Steve Wells. I'm signing up out of here, man. Y'all enjoy y'all day. And until next time, I will holler at you later.